Afternoon, dear colleagues. Welcome again for another Geneva Briefing on Internet Governance webinar. It has become a tradition now since February that every first Tuesday in month we try to go through what has happened in the Internet governance in the previous month and discuss or take a look at what is coming in the next month. After a busy September, especially focused on the Internet Governance Forum, which we discussed during the previous webinar, early September. We are this month moving maybe a little bit to the geopolitical level, trying to summarize where we are and what is coming, especially where the main players are now and how the things are evolving. What are the new initiatives and what is happening around. So before we start, just a brief comment on the title of this webinar, and it is a cyberspace resurrection. How did we come, or why did we put this one into focus? Well, basically, those of you that are in Internet governance might remember or might know about the Barlow's Declaration of 1996 about the independence of cyberspace, where he basically in a way warned the governments of the world that cyberspace is something special and they do not have control within cyberspace. Since then, we have seen a lot of movements towards operationalization of the international law and national law and jurisdiction within cyberspace, and we have seen that a lot of internet governance issues might be actually transposed to the common approaches, common legal approaches. In the meantime, the IGF this year, the IGF has seen another shift possibly, where Milton Miller, talking on behalf of civil society, in a way invited again back to reconsidering Barlow's declaration about the independence of cyberspace, calling the internet as a nation, internet nation, within the closing speech of the Internet Governance Forum. A little bit before that, in June, and then later on in August, Hadi Shekhade, the ICANN CEO, within his speech, mentioned that cyberspace is dead, and that actually we can't consider it a specific separate space anymore. But it simply goes through all the aspects of the current society. This dilemma going back and forth from cyberspace as within all the aspects of the society and including the governance aspects where probably most of the internet governance issues could be touched through the jurisdiction prism versus the calls again for the internet as a separate nation and separate even a mindset is something that will probably that is setting the stage for the next stages of discussions about internet governance. It will be interesting. Later on, we'll hear also from Jovan, who is in Geneva, of his reflections. But it would be also interesting to hear your reflections in between the two poles, or how do you comment on these? Feel free at any point to post your comments in chat, and then we'll get back to that later on. Moving on to a more, as I said, geostrategic aspects of internet governance and where we are. If you remember, in the previous months, we tried almost every month to try to summarize where the positions are of key players when it comes to internet governance. And on this, just a reminder, on this illustration, you can see the tendencies of some players to go towards the non-governmental or intergovernmental solution to internet governance in a very general sense of the word, and where we are trying to find which players are maybe coming closer to a zone of possible agreement, or ZOPA, which is in the center. You can also notice that some players are within this half circle, while some others are a little bit further, which denotes their lack of focused or very clear position on internet governance issues. So those that are within the circle have more profile the more specific positions, more clear positions about internet governance. Now, what we have seen in the, let's say, since or during the summer break and during September of this year are a couple of changes. To the right, we have seen Russian Federation moving even a little bit more towards the intergovernmental, so to speak, position, even though it has already been very strong in that direction, by introducing a stronger grip over with the national policies over national internet in Russia, even mentioning the Russian internet and so on. At the same time, we're seeing a little bit of change. Now, this is probably a question for discussion of China, which in June has been very present on the ICANN meeting in London on one of the highest levels thus far. And we are seeing still the discussion between the US and China, in spite of all the even the blockage of the dialogue at some points about cyberspace. So we might see a slight move of China towards greater discussion on internet governance solutions. India has faced a new government now with the Prime Minister Modi, who on one hand is supported by the corporate sector and with the goals of economic reforms and the corporate sector greater role in India, great part of this corporate sector now being more and more the internet industry. On the other hand, India is still faced with a goal of strengthening the national position of India, which has marked previous years of Indian involvement in internet governance towards intergovernmental solutions. Now, it is up to see what Prime Minister Modi will, in which direction he might turn the position of India when it comes to internet governance, whether more towards multi-stakeholder and zone of possible agreement, or remaining in the intergovernmental part. Brazil certainly is becoming even a stronger leader than before when it comes to internet governance. After Net Mundial, the next Internet Governance Forum 2015 is taking place in Brazil. As we'll mention later on, IGF might face significant improvements, even strengthening in the next years. At the same time, Brazil is facing the presidential elections, and usually we could see that in times of elections and where still we are seeing who is going to win the battle, regardless of the politics that might be later on led on internet governance, the existing structures might take the lead. The existing structure, a very strong one in Brazil, is the CGI, which is both the domain name register for Brazilian country code top level domain and a multi-stakeholder mechanism which has been for years assisting the government with internet governance policies in Brazil. CGI will most likely be the leader or the main player in setting the stage towards the next IGF, not only organizationally but also politically when it comes to the role of the IGF and role of Brazil in this game. The European Commission has changed. We are seeing the new European Commission these days. On one hand, during the first speech of Juncker's, we could see a very strong impact or very strong role of digital policies in the following in the agenda of European Commission in the next years. On the other hand, we have witnessed the first hearing of the main commissioner for digital economy and society, Oettinger, a couple of days ago in the European Parliament, which showed that he personally and for the moment his team might not still be very clear on what are the key challenges, what are the key positions when it comes to net neutrality, copyrights, and other data protection and other key issues for the Europe. So we are certain that Europe will be very strong and prominent in digital issues. The question is whether it will turn more to economic aspects or more to human rights aspects, so to speak. So the position in this diagram will also depend on that. ICANN has slightly moved back from the previous position after opening up the call for the transition of IANA function and discussions about accountability, with a little bit of fuss about Net Mundial initiative and a couple of statements of the CEO back in June about Net Mundial initiative, and afterwards when the World Economic Forum took it over, about some ideas on continuing kind of the alliance or platform regarding Net Mundial. There have been quite a number of critics about the ICANN positions in the recent blogs by the civil society, so that is why we might see a little bit of a step back for ICANN, but with the ICANN 51 approaching, we might see a different position after October. Lastly, the US government, after a big shift in March and April, opening up the transition, the discussion about the transition of IANA, now has made a clear position when it comes to both, when it comes to specifically to the Net Mundial and IGF relations, where we could see that US is still very, very strongly supporting or openly supporting the Internet Governance Forum, while it will be discussing the positions and possible potentials of the Net Mundial follow-ups. I will stop here. We can get back to this slide and discuss the positioning later on. I will call Jovan now to reflect both on the cyberspace resurrection that we titled, and these positions, and then later on brief us a little bit about what is happening with the Net Mundial initiative. Jovan.
Good afternoon to our online participants and our colleagues here in Geneva who are following this briefly monthly summary on internet governance developments. Vlad already mentioned a few major developments, and as you know, we try every month to highlight one line, and it's very difficult to do it in such a complex field. And one resonating message was this dilemma about resurrection of the cyberspace. And you can recall the CEO of ICANN during the World Economic Forum meeting, Vladimir, said that cyberspace is dead, and basically arguing that what is a cyber is now also the real world. And then it came as a surprise when Professor Milton Müller from Syracuse University introduced notion of the nation cyberspace at the IGF in Istanbul. I have to admit that I was positively surprised by Fadi's indication, because it is the reality. Internet is becoming part of our daily life, and it's very, very difficult to separate internet from daily reality. According to the statistics, about 25% of our family exchange nowadays is happening over the internet. And economy is influenced by internet, and health issues, and the other fields. That it is very, very difficult to sustain with the strong arguments idea that cyberspace is something different from the real space. We are still waiting for Milton, who is one of the leading academics in this field, to substantiate this idea of the cyber nation, and which is different from the other nations and which exist in this world. Probably Milton's idea was to strengthen the idea that uniqueness of the cyber communication, especially when it comes to empowerment, freedom of communication, should be somehow supported and not completely moved to the interstate or regular space. But this is the underlying theme. Is the cyberspace dead? Yes or no? Can we expect cyber nation emerging? That was for me resonating zoom out view about it. Another major development which somehow passed unnoticed because of the other focuses on the World Economic Forum announcement of Net Mundial initiative was the statement of the Klaus Schwab, the president of the World Economic Forum, repeated first, introduced during the meeting in Geneva on 28th of August, but then repeated on a few occasions. It is the statement that internet is global public good. This is for the first time that you see from the business association and business disindication, because it has a concrete potential consequences. As a global public good, it requires some sort of global regulation or global protection. Therefore, for me, that was the major development and major shift, and I think international community, business, civil society, and governments should build more on it. It brings me to the point on Net Mundial platform. As we are aware that it raised quite a few comments and controversies when it was introduced at the end of February, at the end of August at the World Economic Forum. And I think there are 2 points that we should keep in mind. One point is some sort of legacy of Net Mundial and new ideas and innovation that were introduced at Net Mundial, especially related to possibility of drafting in multi-stakeholder space, drafting the final resolution as it happened in Sao Paulo with many people around the table, not only governments. That is an interesting idea. Therefore, Net Mundial introduced quite a few ideas, quite inclusive introductory process with many inputs, and also introduced the question of transparency and legitimacy. Therefore, Net Mundial legacy is quite rich, and I think it is important to keep it alive, to build it, to bring it into the internal governance processes. Now, the second point, therefore, apart from the Net Mundial legacy, is the question, should it be officially institutionalized as a process? Here, there are much more critical voices, especially if it should be hosted, as it was at one point suggested by a specific institution, World Economic Forum. Then what would be the endorsement by other countries? Do we need another UN resolution which will endorse some sort of space like Net Mundial? Should it be called Net Mundial? Therefore, there are many questions on the second track, and they're mainly related to legitimacy of this issue. And legitimacy is important because Net Mundial initiative is supposed to deal with so-called public policy or orphan internet governance issues. Therefore, we cannot expect that we can have successful and inclusive space if there is no really determined buy-in by more or less all, or if not all, majority of the players worldwide. Therefore, in brief, yes, extremely important legacy of Net Mundial and building blocks for Net Mundial, and the cautious approach when it's coming to making the Net Mundial institutional framework. Now, our conference in November, the Geneva Internet Conference, will exactly take this approach. It will bring the positive and successful examples of multi-stakeholder participation, mainly from Net Mundial, but also from overseas negotiations hosted by ITU in Geneva, ICANN, IGF, and try to see what are the strongest and most appropriate techniques and approaches based on experience of almost 10 years of negotiating internet governance for the future governance mechanism that we may see appearing in 2015 and 2016. Over to you, Vlada.
Thank you, Jovan. Going on with the other September developments, to some extent, the Internet Governance Forum was definitely under the spotlight. We discussed it just after the IGF. We had a special webinar on that, so I'm not going to repeat it. The digest is on our website. But what is happening now is that the IGF mandate renewal is something that will be discussed in the next months within the UN General Assembly. Most of the proposals, most of the statements from civil society and most of the governments go in the direction of supporting not 5 but 10 years, another 10 years of the IGF. It is likely that the mandate will be extended whether to 5 or to 10 years. It is also not likely that there will be many changes in the description of the mandate, which is in a way not really detailed even now, which leaves space for within the IGF changes in future as it was in the past. The role of the MAG next year will be particularly important. It is now the call for the new members of the MAG, I think, is still open. The decision should be made by the UN DESTA for the next round of MAG members. 1/3 will be changed from all the stakeholders, government, civil society, corporate sector, and technical community. And it is expected that the first meeting in December, beginning of December, of the new and old MAG might set up the ground for towards 2015 IGF in Brazil. Brazil, as we mentioned before, obviously has a leading role, not only being a host, but also being a prominent, one of the most prominent political parties in global internet governance in the recent years. So it is expectable that Brazil will take its role very seriously and possibly try to introduce further improvements and strengthen the IGF, the role of the IGF in this intersessional period. One of the ways to do that might be a combination or inserting the Net Mundial approach to recommendation setting or policy recommendations or some kind of principle setting within the IGF process. Cybersecurity was and is constantly being on the top of the agenda. It appears that it is a more tangible topic than internet governance, which sometimes is a confusing thing. Cybersecurity seems to be more and more the gateway into understanding internet governance because of the constant, very tangible threats, not only cybercrime, the risks of cyber warfare, the DDoS attacks, and all the other things. We have seen a number of articles with regards to the crisis in Middle East and the ISIS concerns. We have seen even the US and FBI positions on possible risks on cybersecurity related to the engagement of the terrorist moves in cyberspace. Most of the analysis go, however, in the direction that the particular hackers or hackers related to ISIS might not be trained enough to do huge cybersecurity threats, but this might change in time. Most of the focus is on the use of social media in recruiting possible terrorists, especially people from Western countries. There was a number of events around the world discussing cybersecurity, and in December there will be also another discussion within Council of Europe on the improvements of the Convention of Cybercrime. So cybersecurity is certainly something to monitor further. Diplo is also quite active in this area with a couple of online courses, winter schools, and so on. What has happened with the right to be forgotten? We had a blog a couple of months ago about the European Court of Justice decision against Google on the right to be forgotten, and we also had a webinar, very interesting webinar, I think it was last week. The digest will be ready soon, or it's maybe even available on our website, exactly about the data protection and including the right to be forgotten case. What has happened since the May decision of the European Court of Justice is that Google has received almost 150,000 requests for removal of certain results within the search results in Europe. So it is said that almost 500,000 links were mentioned in these requests, and that Google thus far positively resolved about a half of the requests, which is a huge number. We have seen even some of the New York Times articles going down, some of the BBC articles going down. Again, emphasis is that those are not visible when we do a search in Europe, but are visible when we do the search out of Europe. And we already saw some of the complaints on that by the BBC and the other media. Some of the links were then brought back to the search engine results by Google and so on. This is going to be a very, very interesting discussion, and the repercussions of this decision on privacy on one hand and freedom of speech on the other hand are still to be very discussed. We have also seen these discussions in Europe. Last interesting topic of not only September, but it's becoming more and more hot to some extent, is the question of access. Google has been discussing for quite some time setting up or launching the balloons, which should go somewhere around 20,000 meters in the sky, and should be able to provide the wireless, the LTE, the mobile internet connection in the remote, the rural areas. The idea is to make a ring of Google balloons around the world, which would then be able to offer internet connection in the very distant areas, including the deserts, including South African countries which might be underdeveloped, including Pacific areas which are hard to reach with a cable. We have seen similar Facebook attempts with regards to drones. So this is something that's becoming more and more popular. The big question for developing countries and for the corporate sector, for policymakers in general, will be the regulation of that. While on one hand, this is obviously a very positive thing because we will have the coverage of with the internet over the areas which are hardly covered by or unreachable by the cables. There is always a question of the regulation of the policy spectrum, of the wireless spectrum, because this will use a part of the wireless spectrum. In Europe, in US, and areas where the digitalization of the TV has come through, there is a large spaces of wireless spectrum which are free and will probably be given within some conditions for use for this kind of services. On the other hand, there is a question of the countries where there is not such a clear regulatory approach to policy to wireless spectrum in the country, and also where maybe there are no portions of wireless spectrum free. How this is going to develop, what might be the approaches for the regulation of the policy spectrum and allocation of certain wireless spectrum slots to these initiatives like Google and Facebook, are sure what might be the response of incumbent telecom operators in developing countries, because this might be a competition. That's something to be seen, and that is definitely something that should be discussed, and we might even organize a couple of events or webinar specifically on that in future within the Geneva Internet Platform. This is the retrospective of the September developments in brief, and what is coming is the two major events. Icon 51, so this is the wrong one. This should be Icon 51 meeting 12th to 16th of October in LA, in USA, where we are likely to see further discussions about the transition of the IANA function towards a possible multi-stakeholder rather than intergovernmental model. We are likely to see discussions again about the accountability of ICANN and the mechanisms of accountability of ICANN to its community, but also to wider communities, including the governments, the strengths and the role of government advisory committee and so on, and possibly and most probably again the discussions about protecting new top-level GTLDs, generic top-level domains, specifically the ones related to regions. And we have seen previously most of the complaints of the governments through the Government Advisory Committee about .wine, .one, and some other .spy and some other new top-level domains that are emerging. On the other hand, the ITU Plenipot conference, where the new Secretary General will be elected, we are not going to speculate who that is going to be. It is also going to be a very strong discussion about the mandate of the ITU, and again, in a way, continuing the trends of discussions within the WCIT and the later discussions within the ITU of possibly extending the mandate of the ITU in some parts, covering the internet policies and overlapping with internet governance. We have seen the strong U.S. position again or rather against changing of the mandate of the ITU. What is quite interesting, and it is a very positive, seems as a very positive development in that direction, is the opening up of what used to be the closed user-protected or username password-protected documents within the ITU. It seems that these documents will be open for public, and in that sense, this is a great step towards transparency and inclusiveness of other stakeholders in the future ITU processes. There is a list of events, not only this, but also regional events at the GIP platform. There'll be another set of things when it comes to the GIP, but I'm passing the microphone off now over to Jovan to reflect both on the October developments, especially the ITU Planipod, and what is happening within the GIP in October. Jovan.
Development in September, and we will include it in summary, was the UN Human Rights Council meeting here in Geneva, which adopted a resolution on online privacy. Therefore, you can't hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, great. You don't need a video. You can see me. There was a resolution on online privacy, which was, in a way, new step in the process, which was initiated by Dilma Rousseff last September at the UNGA. And then there was, as you know, it was discussed at the Human Rights Council. A report was prepared. It was submitted. There was a panel during the meeting, and it's now moving to the UN General Assembly with a few ideas that there should there should be special mechanism for covering online privacy, and some countries agreeing for that, some countries being against that, including linking online privacy to freedom of expression and other developments. This is important development, and I think you rightly mentioned cybersecurity, but we should also keep in mind online privacy and data protection is closely linked to cybersecurity. Well, when it comes to developments in October, as you indicated already, there will be two major events: ICANN event next week in Los Angeles, and the ITU event in Busan. And there will be, in a way, preparations of setting the stage for 2015, where many important developments will have to happen, including the end of this one-year period, the 30th of September, where the new solution for the IANA function in ICANN should be found, and also versus +10 resolution and the negotiation, possible solution for covering orphan issues in internet governance, which may not be as orphan as we think, because e-health is now increasingly dealt by WHO. Therefore, these are the main developments. I don't see any major breakthrough and major sort of seismic shift over the next 2 months. I expect some sort of preparatory building blocks in this process. And this is also the reason why we initiated a few discussions, few threads, which, according to our analysis, were quite important. First one is how to overcome policy silos in internet governance on global and national level. How the people in charge of data protection and privacy, WTO, can speak to people in Human Rights Council, in the ITU standardization organizations, and other bodies. And we have that problem of policy silos almost on all levels of policy making. This is one of thread discussion. Yesterday, Vlada hosted discussion webinar answering the question, whom do I contact if I want to raise my IG concern? There is, we paraphrase the famous statement by Kissinger, who asked what is the phone number of European Union, you remember. This was one of the reasons why European Union then introduced this high representative as the president of the European Council. But now there is the problem and sometimes confusion that people do not know, cannot find the entry point into our IG space. And again, there are discussions, there is discussion within the Net Mundial initiative, a report by a high-level group which was initiated by ICANN, and few ideas, including to have a clearinghouse, to have one-stop shop, or more in computer terminology, to have a router of internet governance issues. This is the second topic. The third topic, which we will initiate on 28th of October, is on evidence and measurement in internet governance. What sort of data and numbers are we talking about? We noticed, and this is a hypothesis or intuitive statement, that there is a very little solid data when it comes to internet governance. And it's in a way paradox because it's engineering artifact, everything is recorded, everything is going through cables which have all sorts of meters and indicators, and we don't know what, for example, is the level of, let's say, interaction between Switzerland and the rest of the world on the internet, or what is the level of cybercrime attacks or cybersecurity attacks. And it will be the topic of our third thread. Therefore, these three threads, policy silos, whom to call, and evidence in policy making, will converge towards the Geneva Internet Conference. And in that way, we are trying to provide constructive and substantive input for discussion, which will start in 2015, by providing Geneva Internet Platform as neutral, inclusive, and professional space for discussing internet governance issues. Over to you.
Thank you, Jovan. Thank you for the overview. So I think we can wrap up this part of the overview and open up for questions and the comments. We have Nigel Hickson from ICANN with us today again, and thank you, Nigel, for joining. I wonder if you might want to reflect briefly on what we can expect in LA during the 51st meeting of ICANN, and generally the position of what's happening with the IANA transition and the ICANN accountability discussions. Nigel.
Thanks very much indeed. I hope you can hear me. It's always a great pleasure to join. Yes, what can we expect at ICANN 51 in Los Angeles? Well, good high temperatures, I understand. It's going to be a sunny week next week in LA. As you have already said, two of the prime issues, of course, are the NTIA transition of the IANA function, and discussions continue on that. This is where all the different parts of the internet broader community are putting proposals forward on what can replace the NTIA in terms of the of their contract with ICANN, and that's an ongoing issue that's got to be resolved in the next 9 months or so. Coupled with that is accountability, how ICANN needs to adapt once the US is no longer has the sort of contract with IANA, and what measures need to be put in place to make ICANN more accountable in certain ways, and that discussion will continue. I think it's also worth mentioning that in LA next week or the week after, there'll be a continuing discussion on GTLDs and on the second round. The ICANN has announced that there will be a second round and has announced a sort of timeline towards the second round that goes into 2017-18. And no doubt there'll be a discussion of the type of reviews and the type of steps that are needed before a second open round on generic top-level domains will be required. So I think that's ICANN. If I could just mention a couple of other things which I think are relevant. First of all, you mentioned WSIS, of course, and this autumn, the second committee at the UN in New York will look at the WSIS resolution every year. And we're hoping that it might be adapted. At the moment, the WSIS resolution before the second committee doesn't say anything about the IGF mandate, but a number of member states want it to, and so hopefully that can take place. At the same time, we and others will be lobbying in New York to try and sort of soften the line that was adopted in June. This is for the final, the WSIS high-level event, which is in December 2015, the final sort of WSIS review conference. And at the moment, although that conference in New York might be multi-stakeholder, the preparation process is intergovernmental, and we're trying to soften that line so other stakeholders get involved in that. And a key aspect of that is the CSTD. The CSTD are doing this is a UN committee are doing a 10-year review of the WSIS outcomes, and hopefully that might be significant in view of that. And finally, Vladimir, just to mention that the OECD, which I know is not a sort of global body, but has some relevance in this internet space because of the work they've done on internet principles and that, they have a meeting in December where they're discussing their next ministerial conference, which is due to take place in 2016, and part of that will be on internet governance. Thank you.
Thank you, Nigel. Very, very useful, and as always, good insights into what's happening in ICANN and generally. Ginger asked you basically while you were talking. She said, Nigel, can you address the internationalization of the DNS? Will it be a big issue? It's talking about IANA functions, taking attention from the more media-centric ICANN controversy. While they are the same issue, the change in framing changes the center of attention. So in a way, the internationalization of the DNS. I don't know, Nigel, if you want to briefly reflect on that.
Well, yeah, I mean, I agree with you. I think it's all bound up. I mean, ICANN is the globalization, if you like, of ICANN has many different strands to it. Part of which, of course, is being in Geneva and elsewhere and taking part in international debate on internet governance issues. But of course, it also has a lot to do with the ensuring that, in terms of the future, that what goes into the root of the internet is determined by a multi-stakeholder international sort of internet community, rather than being subject to sort of one country's agreement, so to speak. So I think it's all bound up in that.
Thank you. Okay, floor is yours if you have any further questions. Any one of you, Ginger, or anyone else, Katerina, David. The others, if you have any questions or comments, Ginger says, thanks, excellent point, Nigel. ICANN then can globalize itself with a question mark. Well, I guess this is the key part of the discussion on ICANN accountability as well, and we will see more on that in future. Jovan, I don't know if you want to make any final reflection on the process, including ICANN and DNS, or?
Well, nothing special. Just for those colleagues who are new to the discussion, this IANA function NTA, we are for too long into the process, are basically related to the umbilical code, a special link between ICANN and the U.S. government. This is the key issue of how that can be replaced by something else. This is the core of the current negotiations and current discussion. I think, I don't know if I should take Japanese interpretation, but we are living in the interesting time. It's not boring. There are many things, and I think the exercise of keeping the track of all of these threads that we are trying to do with this monthly summaries, what's going on, is important, because we counted at least 4 or 5 tracks: ICANN, ITU, Human Rights Council, CSTD, Second Committee, UN, New York Dynamics. And it is really, really difficult to keep track of all of this, which countries have to do if they want to follow the major IG developments. Vlad and I just discussed that we'll probably publish towards the year summary of 2015 based on the monthly webinars and briefings after the webinars to see what was the dynamic. Sometimes it's important to step back and to see what is the broader dynamic, what were the major advances that we have made, and what are the possible setbacks. Therefore, this is the broader context. Therefore, stay tuned, keep in touch, and hopefully we'll see you at our conference on 18th and 19th of November in Geneva. In the meantime, we will follow online discussions and our regular updates on the major developments. Special thanks to Nigel for being the constant participant in our webinar and bringing us the news from the ICANN community and developments in this field. Thank you.
Thank you, Jovan, and thank you for reminding that sometimes we use the acronyms, even though we have always the different audience during the webinars, and not everyone is always much into internet governance. Thank you all for coming. If there are no further questions, thank you all for coming again. Reminder that the video and the digest from this webinar will be available soon on our website. See you during these other webinars and discussions within the Geneva Internet Platform, especially within the tracks of the Geneva Internet Conference. See you the first Tuesday of November again to review what has happened in October and what we are looking into November. And definitely see you hopefully at the Geneva Internet Conference in November. Thank you all for joining us today. Bye-bye.